Good afternoon. Oh, come on. You can do better than that. Good afternoon. Much better. See, Alan, you have me trained. Okay. It's so good to see everyone, and I want to add my welcome to those that you have probably already received here at this S-STEM meeting, where we have a wonderful program of events planned for you. I am Shirley Malcolm, and I am a senior advisor and director of a program called Sea Change at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Once again, I want to really honor the fact that we are so pleased to be able to work with the National Science Foundation in coordinating and bringing this meeting together. And I hope that you will, in fact, feel the kind of the love during this meeting and be able to share with each other the work that you're doing and the accomplishments that you're all doing. My job is really to just kind of keep things moving and to introduce the people who will welcome us and then to introduce our speaker. I want to begin with the welcome from the director of the National Science Foundation, the Honorable Franz Cordova. She's an astrophysicist and the 14th director of the NSF. She was nominated to this position by the President of the United States in 2013 and subsequently confirmed by the U.S. Senate. NSF is a $8.1 billion independent federal agency and is the only government agency that is charged with advancing all fields of scientific discovery, technological innovation, and STEM education. Dr. Cordova has been a leader in science, engineering, and education for more than 3 decades. I think that we even go back about 3 decades because I first met her when she was the chair of the astronomy program at Penn State. Prior to that time, she was deputy group leader at Los Alamos National Lab. She is president emerita of Purdue University, chancellor emerita of the University of California, Riverside, and the former vice chancellor for research at the University of California, Santa Barbara. She also served as NASA's chief scientist and is a recipient of the agency's highest honor, the Distinguished Service Medal. She has a distinguished career in both higher education and government. Her scientific contributions in multispectrum research on X-ray and gamma-ray sources and space-borne instrumentation have made her an internationally recognized astrophysicist. She received her bachelor's from Stanford and her PhD in physics from the California Institute of Technology, where we have another connection. And we are pleased to have her begin our program here with a welcome. Franz.
Hello and good evening, everyone. It's just such a pleasure to be here. It's a real honor to get to help open this wonderful event. And I want to thank especially Shirley Malcolm because, as she said, we've known each other for a few decades now, and she's just been a leader in everything that she's touched and been involved in. She's really moved the state of science forward. So thank you. Thank you very much, Shirley. NSF is pleased to partner with the American Association for the Advancement of Science to host this symposium. The AAAS Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion programs, especially the Sea Change Initiative, are doing important work to ensure that science and engineering communities grow stronger through diversity. I want to take just a moment to recognize the hard work that goes into making the S-STEM program a success. NSF is fortunate to have dedicated people in our Education and Human Resources Directorate, led by Karen Marangel, along with Sylvia James, and in the Division of Undergraduate Education, led by Robin Wright and Lee Zia. In particular, I want to acknowledge the great work done by the NSF S-STEM program staff, and I'd like you all to give a big hand to that staff, please. Thank you. So welcome to the 2019 S-STEM Symposium. It's wonderful to see so many people here, and I think Shirley was just telling me that it's like 50% higher than the biggest number they imagined it would be, so great turnout. It's been my privilege to be the director of the National Science Foundation at a time when we're making great strides forward in science and technology. Just 5 months ago, NSF was able to announce that the Event Horizon Telescope project had taken the first image of a black hole. How many of you saw that image somewhere? Yes. Yes, it appeared on the front pages of newspapers all over the world, and we have a big montage to celebrate that. It was a stunning moment, and it appeared on the front pages of every newspaper not because people hadn't heard of black holes before, but because they had never gotten visual evidence. And it's, we're people that need to be convinced by our eyes seeing something. And seeing that image of the shadow of a black hole really made people feel that they're out there. And there's a lot of them, I have to add. So prior to that was the announcement that the IceCube Neutrino Observatory at the South Pole had traced an extremely high-energy neutrino back to its source, which is a flaring active galaxy way far away, marking the first time that astrophysicists had been able to identify extragalactic sources of cosmic rays. And that solved a 106-year-old mystery of the origin of high-energy cosmic rays. So that's what we are. We're detectives, we're scientists, we're trying to solve big mysteries. And in 2017, we announced the discovery of the first detection of gravitational waves on Earth by the LIGO facility, which earned Ray Weiss, Kip Thorne, and Barry Barish the Nobel Prize in Physics a couple of years later. So, the conclusion of all that is discovery is happening now, just when you think, what's left to discover? It's just amazing things are happening, and they're happening because of the ingenuity of the scientists, the young scientists, the mature scientists, all the scientists and engineers that we get to work with. Across all disciplines of science and engineering, researchers are making breakthroughs and pushing the boundaries to expand our knowledge of the world and how it's worked. So it's really an exciting time to be a scientist, and it gives us even more motivation and reason for bringing more young people into science and engineering, because they too can make just profound discoveries with the technology constantly changing and improving. At NSF, we're also reflecting on the past as we approach our 70th birthday next year. Yes, in 1950, we were signed into legislation by Congress. That was our birthday in 1950. So we'll have lots of celebrations next year, and hope that you'll be a part of that. Our motto at NSF is where discoveries and discoverers begin. And if you trace back the development of countless technologies that we use every day, you'll find that NSF was there at the start. By funding basic research, sometimes over the course of decades, like the LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, was a 40-year investment. NSF has helped innovators and researchers make the breakthroughs that underpin cell phones and barcodes and 3D printing, Google, MRI machines, and thousands of other things that we use every day that we take for granted. We're excited to celebrate that legacy. But today, I'm excited to be here because S-STEM is about the future. For our S-STEM scholars who've traveled to be here today, welcome and congratulations. This is about your future and the future of the science community. It's difficult to overemphasize the importance of STEM education in our success. And when I say our success, I mean our success as a research community, our nation's economic success, and our success, of course, as a society. Research has shown that more than half of the U.S. economic growth over the last 50 years has resulted from improved productivity that has been brought about by STEM-led innovation. And people who are economists have derived that. Most recently, Paul Romer, who won a couple of years ago the Nobel Prize in Economics. The economy of the next 50 years will be even more interconnected, more global, and more reliant on science and technology, and that's why there's so much competition around the world. Everybody wants to be a part of that. So STEM education is critical to the future and ensuring that the scientific community has a strong base of research talent, and that's one of NSF's primary missions. You know, I attended an informal meeting to talk about quantum science at DOE not long ago, and there were a lot of industry people there. And in the view of industry, they look at NSF as a STEM workforce agency. And I was kind of surprised at that. I said, no, we're the discovery agency. We fund discoveries and discoverers. And they said, well, how do you think we get there? We get there by developing the STEM workforce, and that's NSF's sweet spot. That's what you've been doing for a very long time. You've been funding high school, before high school, elementary school, and definitely our sweetest spot, college, undergraduates, graduate students, and postdocs. That mission goes back to our founding. In 1945, Vannevar Bush published a report, famous policy report. If you haven't read it, please do. I just read it again this summer, called Science, the Endless Frontier. It laid out a plan for a federal agency, that was before NSF existed, designed to support basic research. He said, quote, "The most important ways in which the government can promote industrial research are to increase the flow of new scientific knowledge through the support of basic research, and to aid in the development of scientific talent." And he devoted a big part of his encyclical to development of scientific talent. The responsibility to seek out and foster scientific talent wherever it is found is part of our founding principles. People are the cornerstone of the science enterprise, and greater diversity leads to greater success for that enterprise. Diversity, as you all appreciate, isn't just important because of demographics. Everyone has different life experiences that provide different perspectives. New perspectives are what science is all about. How do you make great discoveries unless you're coming at a problem, a challenge, with a completely new perspective? New perspectives provide alternate ways of looking at hard problems. Multiple perspectives lead to additional insights, greater understanding, and more paths for future discovery. Achieving those paths requires us to go beyond just financial aid as we work to broaden participation in STEM education. Recognizing ability and recruiting talent in underrepresented groups is the first step, but developing that ability and talent to its full potential is how we ensure success for both students and the communities they join. NSF is committed to broadening participation in STEM education and careers. In 2016, we launched our so-called 10 Big Ideas to shape new areas of research and address critical gaps in the nation's research enterprise. And one of those big ideas, you may have heard it, you may even be participating in it, is called NSF Includes. It's our initiative to demonstrably broaden diversity and participation in STEM within a single generation. We've been funding broadening participation for a very long time. So what's new about Includes is that it engages whole communities, and it's a network of networks. So it's an attempt to scale up all the good efforts that we've seen grow and grow over decades, but haven't always communicated with each other. To do this, we're investing in alliance and partnerships to unite a wide range of collaborators and enhance the collective impact of our individual Includes programs. We're also partnering with private entities and professional societies to determine key components and approaches that lead to scalable success for inclusion and diversity. And we're really happy to announce, when the White House rolled out its STEM education plan last December, that 5 other federal agencies have joined in the NSF Includes programs, agencies like NASA and NIH and USGS and NOAA. The Includes National Network is a resource that's come out of this big idea, and it is building cross-sector partnerships and resources to create educational and career opportunities for underrepresented communities. And you can learn more about this at includesnetwork.org. This big idea is building on lessons that S-STEM has learned over the past 13 years through your hard work. Those lessons are critical to ensuring the diverse and capable research community and STEM workforce that our economy has to rely on. We succeed more when more of us succeed. You have an exciting agenda over the coming days. I hope you find the presentations valuable. I got to take a little peek at some of the posters there. They look wonderful. Hope you make great connections and have a rewarding experience here at S-STEM. Thank you.
You know, the one amazing thing is that was pointed out is this whole question about being able and willing to invest for the long term in order to see these breakthroughs actually come. I would like to introduce, to give you a welcome from the AAAS side, my boss and long-term friend, Dr. Alan Leshner, who is the interim CEO and executive publisher of the Science family of journals. Dr. Leshner was appointed the interim CEO, Chief Executive Officer of AAAS in July this year. He had previously served as the AAAS CEO and executive publisher from 2001 to 2015, when he became CEO Emeritus. In other words, we don't let him get away. AAAS was founded in 1848, and it is the largest general science and engineering society in the world. Before coming to AAAS, Dr. Leshner was director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and he spent time at NIDA as the deputy and then the acting director of, deputy and acting director of the National Institute of Mental Health. He went to NIMH from the National Science Foundation, where he held a number of senior positions focusing on research, basic research in biological, behavioral, and social sciences, science policy, and science education. He had been at Bucknell prior to that time as a professor of psychology. Dr. Leshner received his undergraduate degree in psychology from Franklin and Marshall College and MS and PhD degrees in what we call then physiological psychology from Rutgers. He's also received 7 honorary degrees. He's an elected fellow of AAAS, the National Academy of Public Administration, the other AAAS, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and many other professional societies. He's also a member of the National Academy of Medicine. He also served 2 terms as a member of the National Science Board, something that he and I have in common. So we've had the experience of NSF as staff people, and then being able to be to serve on the board and be able to see the progress of the foundation over time. So it is my pleasure to introduce our next welcomer, Dr. Alan Leshner.
Thank you, Shirley. That was actually longer than my remarks, so that was impressive. So, good afternoon. Okay, you missed an important action. So you heard, right? I used to run the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and drug abuse, everybody holds hands and sings Kumbaya, and you go, good afternoon. They go, good afternoon. And I've actually become addicted to it. So if you don't mind, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. We are here for a truly wonderful event, and it's a great pleasure for us to be doing this in partnership with the National Science Foundation. I have to say that as Dr. Cordova was speaking, I was thinking, I was going to say that, I was going to say that, I was going to say that, and therefore I have nothing to say. But I do want to say that we in NSF share our collective concerns for the scientific enterprise, both in the United States and throughout the world. And with that, and in our case, with being the largest general scientific society in the world, comes a responsibility and obligation to think about the state of that enterprise now and looking into the future. And bluntly put, you are the future. We feel that we have to worry about every aspect of the enterprise, of course, but in particular, we want to help ensure the strength of the scientific workforce, the scientific capacity of the country. And the only way we'll be able to do that, the only way we can take advantage of the wonderful ideas coming from all facets of the population, is to have, in fact, a truly diverse, equitable, and inclusive scientific workforce. And obviously, one of the main purposes of the S-STEM program, the S-STEM Symposium, is to ensure that. And don't feel any pressure, but our hopes are with you. And we expect you to live up to the expectation, to help us recruit additional talented individuals into the scientific workforce, to help inspire them, to make them feel included as a true part of the workforce, so that we as a society can, in fact, take full advantage of the opportunities provided by science. So with that, and the fact that we have this opportunity to partner with our partners, the National Science Foundation, it looks like a wonderful symposium ahead. There are certainly many very good ideas circulating in this room, incubating as we speak. Don't let go of the ideas, in spite of the fact that you were totally rapt by my comments. Seriously, I hope that you'll be able to exploit every aspect of this meeting, the networking, the lessons to be learned, the principles that can be distilled and generalized and used more broadly throughout our community. And while you're at it, if you have a chance, enjoy it as well. So thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for ensuring a strong future for the science that we all love so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate those remarks and the welcome, and I hope you feel welcomed. I feel welcomed. Now we have the opportunity to really hear a inspiring, dynamic speaker who is going to help us, I think, contextualize a lot of the work that has to be done in order to support getting our students through. Sara Goldrick-Rab, professor of higher education policy and sociology at Temple University, and founding director of the Hope Center for College, Community, and Justice in Philadelphia, is also the chief strategy officer for emergency aid at Equity, a student financial success and emergency aid company, and founded Believe in Students, a nonprofit distributing emergency aid. She is best known for her innovative research on food and housing insecurity in higher education, having led the 4 largest national studies on the subject, and for her work on making public higher education free. She's the recipient of the William T. Grant Foundation's Faculty Scholars Award, the American Educational Research Association's Early Career Award, and the Carnegie Fellowship. In 2016, Politico magazine named her one of the top 50 people shaping American politics, and she is ranked 6th in the nation among education scholars, according to Education Week. Her latest book, Paying the Price: College Costs, Financial Aid, and the Betrayal of the American Dream, won the 2018 Grandmeyer Award and was featured on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, which basically puts her up there with me in any case. The Chronicle of Higher Education calls Sara, quote, a defender of impoverished students and a scholar of their struggles, an accurate description of her life's work. So please join me in welcoming our speaker, Dr. Sara Goldrick-Rab.
Okay, I'm a walker, so I hope you all will bear with me. Thank you all so much for the invitation to be here today. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to be in Washington in particular at this moment. I spent the afternoon doing a congressional briefing, releasing a new GAO report about the crisis facing student parents. For those of you that haven't seen it, 4.3 million undergraduates, 22% of all of them are student parents, and only about 3,300 of those 4.3 million students are receiving federal support with childcare. Coming from that setting to you all, and then going home tonight to watch the debate, we have a lot of work to do. And certainly, as was said, it is a very exciting time and a difficult time to be a scientist. But let's also be honest, it is a very exciting and very difficult time to be a college student. And so I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you about the important work that you're doing. I very much agree. If we do not diversify our workforce, if we do not bring more people into the conversation, we are not going to solve the hardest problems. And some of the things you all are working on are some of the most urgent problems I think our nation faces. Let's start by talking a little bit about what brings people to college right now. Now, I understand there's a lot of discourse about the extent to which students are college ready, the extent to which they've chosen a major by day 1, by year 3, by year 6, right? There's a lot of discussion about people being academically adrift. I've spent about 20 years now looking at the students themselves and listening to them and collecting data on their lives. And the quotes up here are the most representative of the reasons that people are coming to higher education. When they're asked about what they need, they talk about the importance of getting what they call a decent job and having a decent life. That's not about getting rich. That's not about making six figures. It's not about having a big home. It's not about having a fast car. People these days entering higher education have more modest ambitions because they know the world that we're in is so profoundly unstable that what they really seek is to be okay. They also, very many of them, and especially the students that you're here to talk about, they're not really here to get that wage premium only for themselves. The vast majority of them are also concerned about the other people in their lives. So when you talk to them about why they're in college, they'll talk to you about their parents. While the federal government often assumes that those parents are supporting them while they're in college, especially financially, we find that's rarely the case. These folks are trying to get ahead and trying to become financially stable so that they can not only support themselves, but support their families and support their communities. And as we think about supporting them both financially and academically, we need to think about that entire network of people who are depending on these students actually getting the degree. And we have to take a hard look at ourselves. We in academia for a very long time have had a set of assumptions and ways of talking. They undermine our own students' success. Now, I understand after spending years in higher education how easy it is to look at the latest crop of students coming in the door of our classrooms and think to myself, you know, they're kids. Increasingly, as my own kids almost become these people. But you know what? They're not kids. And they've grown up in an age and a time that's radically different than those that a lot of us experienced. A lot of young people today have been adultified through a process of financial insecurity that has led their parents to lean on them. They're growing up in an age of austerity, at a time when, in fact, despite the claims, there's less government spending to support their education. There's less per-student support to help them get through college. There's less per-student support even for things like extracurriculars to help increase their access to the fields that you're concerned with. Our language matters. Another term that I hope that you will think a lot about over the next couple of days is the term needy. Students who are financially needy is a term that they reject. They don't even like to be called low income because it frankly is a deficit. They see themselves as people of immense strength fighting through some incredibly difficult times. So what my team calls them are real college students. We use #RealCollege to denote that times have changed. The world looks very, very different. They're not non-traditional anymore if they have children. They are the new traditional. But by denoting that this is real college, we also, and I'm going to date myself a bit here, hearken to MTV. Does anybody remember The Real World? Okay, it's time to stop being polite and start getting real. And so we got to talk about the new economics of college. Now, if you're interested in all of these dynamics, I've got a whole book that outlines them. I just want to hit the main points because I want you to recognize that this is not a conversation only about tuition. And you've been hearing more and more people say that, I'm sure, that, you know, we can make college tuition free, and we're still going to need to deal with living expenses. Living expenses have been rising even when tuition is frozen, and financial aid is not linked, usually, to the rise in living expenses. That's really issue number one. But issue number two is what has happened to families. We cannot pretend, those of us that like data, we cannot pretend that this is the first time in American history that tuition's gone up. It's been going up since the 1980s, and the fact is that we didn't have much of an outcry. In the 80s and the 90s, you did not hear about people saying, college is just so unaffordable. There were people who found it unaffordable and just didn't go. And then there were the people who went, and when they saw the bill go up year after year, they also saw their wages tend to go up year after year. In this century, that's changed. We now have people who are not sure that their own children are going to have a life better than the one that they had. We have people who are watching their wages effectively decline year after year. It looks way different to try to support your college student or to support yourself as a college student under those circumstances. It's also incredibly difficult at a time when we're receiving, as I noted earlier, less support from government, especially when we become the people who begin to fall financially. I'm going to be talking in a few minutes about food insecurity. And I often hear folks who went to college, say in the 1970s, say to me, you know, food insecurity is not new. I don't understand why kids these days can't just go get on food stamps. Well, first of all, we don't call them food stamps anymore. We call it SNAP, and it's for a reason. But second, the program has radically changed. Beginning with the change from AFDC to TANF, this is the welfare system, in 1996, we started adding work requirements to most of our social safety net programs. And SNAP now has work requirements. Now, I know you all are familiar with the consequences of working during college, especially working while trying to get a STEM degree. But if a student wants to eat every day and needs to get on SNAP, they are told that the work they're doing in your classrooms, the work that they're doing in their extracurriculars, the work they're doing studying does not count as work. They have to work an extra 20 hours a week on top of school in order to qualify for SNAP unless they meet one of a small handful of exceptions. And work itself just doesn't pay like it used to. It's not just that you'd have to work so many more hours now to cover rising college costs, it's that our labor force has shifted. There are more employers spreading a limited number of hours across many employees. There are more people competing for part-time jobs. The value of the minimum wage has declined. And even jobs like those that I did in college, I went to George Washington University, I waited tables all over the district. Okay, I used to take those cash tips that I got from burgers and pancakes and cocktails and put them in my apron and take them home. I did not report them to the IRS, okay? When's the last time that you tipped in cash? You're tipping on credit cards, and all of that is going right into the system. People simply do not take home as much money as they used to. And the last issue, and I know this is the most controversial one, some people find it so hard to believe, colleges are underfunded. It's a fact. There's just no way around it. On a per student basis, we spend today about 25% less per student than we used to spend. And yet we're welcoming more people to college and telling them to come to college who have more needs, not less. So that's a perfect storm. All of those things, under-resourced students from under-resourced families with really high needs and ambitions and strengths and all of that, but it's not getting the job done. And they're coming in to a system and a moment where there are really important aspects of their life that they're told it is not okay to talk about. On the screen is a quote from one of the respondents in a series of interviews that my team did. Beginning in 2008, following around a cohort of 3,000 low-income students, call them Pell recipients, they all were, for 6 years. And we got to know this young man very well. He was 18 years old. He wanted to be an engineer. And when we asked him what's the hardest thing about college, he did not talk about his classes. He talked about how hard it was to pay his own bills and then turn around and help his mom with hers. This young man was not naive. He did not know that he should put the money towards books. He knew that if he did not help his mom keep the lights on at home, he'd have to quit college and go get a full-time job to help her. That was his reality. The problem is, that's not something that he thought he could talk about with his professors or any staff member, and he actually knew that if he mentioned it to his financial aid officer, she might tell him he was doing something illegal, because helping your mom is considered a non-educational expense. We found that 40% of the Pell Grant recipients in that particular study, all of whom started college right out of high school, 40% of them were regularly giving money to their families. And that brings me to the Wu-Tang. Okay, mild laughter. So some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you have no idea. There's a Spotify playlist that goes with this talk, if you'd like to download it. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with this song, Cream, this song is about what it's like to go through every single day of your life thinking about nothing but money. When cash rules everything around you and you're supposed to be focused on lecture, you're distracted. When cash rules everything around you and instead of showing up for class, you're at work, you're not going to get the material. We know from very good scientific research that scarcity has cognitive effects. I know this is the group I do not need to explain that to. But how often have we as faculty entered a classroom and seen a student sleep in front of us and thought to ourselves, boy, they're really just not motivated? How many of us have ever thought about the cognitive effects of cream that are showing up in our daily lives? It turns out not many of us in higher ed, and in fact, we have very conveniently for a long time forgotten about Maslow. The students have not. And I think that honestly, one of the most important moments of my career came when in the course of doing survey work and experimental intervention work, a student admitted that the biggest problem she had in college was that she had not eaten in 2 days. And my team took that bit of qualitative data and turned around and started testing to see if, in fact, that problem was happening anywhere else. For those of you that are not familiar with food insecurity and how it's measured, I'm showing you the United States Department of Agriculture's 10-item scale. My team has played with different measures. We've tried the 2, the 6, the 10, and we do the 18 now, especially with community college students. As you can see from what's up there, this is not mainly about students who say, you know, I really would like to eat sushi, and all I can afford is ramen. Okay, if you're going to be assessed as food insecure, you're going to have to say, yes, this happened to me in the last 30 days to at least 3 of the 10 items up there. And you're not going to be assessed as at the very lowest level of food insecurity, which is where actually the majority of food insecure students measure, unless you say yes to at least 6 of those measures. So we're not just talking about food selection, and we're not just talking about being worried, which is significant. We're talking about people who are reporting losing weight, people who are reporting going without enough to eat for as many as a day, or as many as 3, or even 4 or more days in the last month. We've also forgotten about the consequences of not having stable housing, in part because we're so distracted by the rise of these luxury apartments around many of our campuses. Housing insecurity is a big deal. It's happening to affect people all over this country right now. We know we have an eviction crisis, for example. But these issues are also coming up with regard to interpersonal safety. They're coming up with regard to the very low uptake of some of our most important utilities programs. The fact that the LIHEAP program, which provides heat assistance to people every single year, goes underspent. These issues are also affecting American college students because, and this may surprise you, only 13% of the nation's undergraduates live on a college campus. 13%. About half of the nation's undergraduates live with their parents. They also help pay their parents' bills. And so when something happens in that home, it happens to the student as well. Homelessness is also happening. I'm going to show you some numbers for a moment, but first, because I know that you care about measurement, I want to say something about our measures. The United States federal government has 6 different definitions of homelessness. It's a little bit ridiculous. Okay, some of those programs have a definition because they're rationing access to affordable housing, and they feel that it's scarce, and so they have to be especially stringent in the criteria. But the Department of Education uses a definition that comes from the McKinney-Vento Act, and the purpose of that is to identify the students who really need additional support. They're not necessarily going to be able to provide housing, but they might be able to provide somebody for this person to talk to. And they need somebody in the school, for example, to be aware of what could be going on with this student, looking out, for example, for signs of trauma. We use the McKinney-Vento definition now. My team did not always use it. We were afraid that people would say to us, well, couch surfing is normal for college students. Our interviews show us quite clearly that is not true. There is nothing normal about doing what Mary, who's a student that I worked with for 3 years over the last 4 in Philadelphia, what she experienced as a 36-year-old woman raising a 9-year-old, while she spent every month switching from couch to couch to couch. She's 6'2". She shared a single couch with a 9-year-old boy. Mary didn't get any sleep. I'll be honest, Mary's not bad at math at all. Her grades in math went way up after we managed to get her housing stabilized. But nobody had asked Mary when they saw her bad math grades whether the issue might be that she wasn't getting any sleep because she had nowhere to live. The federal government does not ask any of the questions I just described about food insecurity or housing insecurity of the nation's undergraduates in its nationally representative surveys, and none of our surveys of households do a good job of capturing undergraduates. As a result, I have no nationally representative numbers to show you. Instead, I have numbers to show you from the last 5 years of my team going out and getting college by college by college to agree to let us email their undergraduates to conduct an electronic survey, which has a low response rate. I mean, come on. I'm sending emails to undergrads who are busy texting and doing other things, right? If they even have a phone or a computer with which to access anything. So yes, in a moment, and I have to admit, when I got this invitation, I thought to myself, can I show with the National Science Foundation and all of you folks my low response rate surveys? Am I gonna lose my PhD? Yeah, I'm gonna show them to you, and I'm gonna show them to you because my results are incredibly stable across time, across institution, and now across surveys and studies done by other people. And the United States GAO in January released a report that validated our numbers. So we've done so far these surveys at 269 colleges and universities. Most of them are community colleges. Most of them are, if not community colleges, then they're public universities, and a few are privates. 75% of American undergraduates go to these kinds of institutions. We have responses from 167,000 students. By next spring, we'll be reporting out on about 350,000 in total at about 500 institutions. Our numbers continue to grow every year. Who's not here? I'll be very blunt. The for-profit colleges, they're not here. The very elite colleges, they're not here. And a large number of the tuition-dependent private institutions in particular. So you can think about that as you look at the data. These are the rates that we see. When I summarize this, I would say at least one-third of American undergraduates are affected by basic needs and security. At the community colleges, it's probably closer to half. It matters for you all. You know how important those community colleges are as access points to the degrees that you want them to have. They're absolutely critical. They're deeply underfunded. Their students are in a lot of trouble. Those homelessness rates, I want to note that those ranges on the low end, that's when we don't include couch surfing, and the high end is when we do. And those rates are over the last 12 months. What stuns me when I look at those numbers is how many decades have gone by where we've talked about inclusion and diversity and equity, and we never talked about any of these things. How little have we known about our students? These students, when we do time use studies, which admittedly are very hard to do and flawed, But when we just look within the data that we do have, when we break it down by subgroup, it's very clear that students who do not have their basic needs secured miraculously spend as much time studying and as much time on school as students who do have something to eat and a safe place to sleep. And by the way, it's not just because so few people are studying. None of our data line up with the data that you've seen that suggests that today's undergraduates study less than in the past. I'm not sure what's wrong with those studies. I'm just telling you none of our data align with it. What we can see in our data is that they are academically committed. They do have ideas of what they want to do and why. But they are so distracted by work, and in particular, they are so distracted by a lack of sleep. Now, we do a lot of intervention work at the Hope Center, and before we were the Hope Center, we were the Wisconsin Hope Lab, and we received some support from NSF many years ago. And before that, we received support from the Spencer Foundation and others, and so together we've done 2 studies, both of which were randomized controlled trials of financial aid. In fact, we led the first ever randomized controlled trial of need-based aid. You might be asking yourself, how can you randomly assign need-based aid? It's really not that hard. There is a very limited amount of need-based aid out there. There is administrative data which will show you who meets your eligibility criteria. And rather than disappoint a bunch of people, telling them they could sign up for a chance to get a grant and deny it, we simply worked with the administrative data to identify the eligible pool and then pull the winners using a lottery. We then notified them to let them know that, in fact, they were going to receive additional funds. The first study were Pell Grant recipients in Wisconsin at 42 2-year and 4-year colleges. All of the technical colleges in the state were included. They could receive up to an additional $3,500 per year. It was based solely on their financial need. They were all full-time, though. There were no conditions based on major. We did not say you need to be in a STEM major in order to get these things, nor did we say we want you to go into a STEM major in order to keep the money. The second study, which was supported by NSF, we took a different group of Pell Grant recipients. This was several years later. This one began in 2013. These were students who had indicated, and this was a light indication, okay? This was like, I might be interested in X majors, that they were interested in STEM. These included both Pell recipients and what I would call near Pell recipients, people who are up to 200% of the eligibility line. These are sort of the lower half of the middle class. They're often really stuck. They're in the great gray middle where they're told they're not poor enough to get a Pell Grant, but they're not rich enough to be able to afford college without grants. We got these people an additional $1,000. The Great Lakes organization complemented the NSF grant by providing another $5 million in support to give these folks $1,000 a year for many years. We did not ever communicate to these people that they needed to continue in STEM. Not one word about STEM to them. It was just that they had some inclination. So what did this do? First, the low-income student scholarship, let's call it that, they had no STEM intentions. We saw, over 6 years, a 42% increase in the likelihood of declaring a STEM major. We saw a 27% increase in the rate of completing a STEM major. We saw very little on the averages. Okay, so if you look at the randomized trial and you look at the studies that we've reported, the effects are actually really concentrated in the STEM fields. How could that be? Well, we don't know for sure, but we have documented that one of the most important changes that happened for these students is that they became less likely to work really extensive hours, and they were less likely to work the graveyard shift. The graveyard shift pays more money and oftentimes is the only shift available, but it's terrible for your sleep and therefore your academic performance. Let's turn and look at the study that NSF funded. This paper's not yet out there, so don't bother searching for it. We saw a 26% increase in the likelihood of declaring a STEM major in that study and a 20% increase in the likelihood of persisting in a STEM major to the 3rd year of college. We don't yet have completion information. I think what's notable here, as you have heard me emphasize, is that we gave them additional financial support. We didn't talk to them about the academic expectations associated with it. The support alone created these outcomes. However, they clearly are insufficient. 3 in 4 students still did not finish college in 4 years. The majority of students still did not graduate in STEM fields. This does not mean that money does not matter to students. I have a whole book that describes the 800 ways in which money absolutely matters, but the traditional financial aid system is just not that good at delivering it. If you want to think about why it's not that good, I just want you to think about the FAFSA for a moment. Okay, right? Small American bureaucratic tragedy of a form. And after you FAFSA, then you get verified. And after that, there's a whole series of performance requirements that trip these students up from actually keeping their money. The messaging is terrible, the hassle factor is high. So it's also incredibly underfunded at the federal level, which means we have to do better. So let me talk for just a couple minutes about some of the things that we need to do. And I'm a sociologist. My grandmother always told me that sociology was the statement of the obvious. I think she wanted me to be a doctor. Anyway, so here we are. I'm going to say to a group of scientists, students are humans first. It's very, very basic. And I got to tell you, having tried it myself, it's the single best mindset intervention you can do. Just center this. We have t-shirts if you need one. It says on the back, students are humans first. Okay? If you stop and you look at your student, instead of assuming that just because they're here in your classroom, there are things already in place, and start asking yourself, do they have their human needs met? I am not suggesting you're going to go out there and meet all those needs. I am suggesting that if those needs are not met, you'll be more effective in reaching them. Scaled up, this creates what we call an inclusive culture of caring. It is possible to do this even in situations and places that are focused more on their status than they are on their diversity. I've documented the processes through which Amarillo College, which is it's located in the panhandle of Texas, has reoriented itself from an institution that only thought about what percentage of its students transferred and only thought about how elite they were when they got their jobs at the end of the day, to a college that says to itself, what are we doing to make sure people are okay? And in doing so, the end product has been that they've increased their graduation rates. The most difficult part, though, is that we have to stop talking about the good old days and stop wishing that our students were different. I know it's really easy to turn and look at K-12, and I know that many of you have experience working in K-12, but let's be really honest. K-12 is not as broken as some folks lead you to believe. It's actually a really difficult time to be teaching in K-12 education, and there's a lot of material to cover. It's harder than ever. But the fact is, this is what we have, and these students are coming to us every single year. And a whole lot of them have already been through, by the way, and dropped out with debt and no degree. And we need to bring them back. We need to bring them back. The creation of the STEM pipeline cannot only be about 18-year-olds. There are 25-year-olds out there and 29-year-olds out there with enormous potential and a year or two of college education who are suffering and unable to pay their bills because they have debt and no degree. We need to recognize, and we have so much data on this now, that life and logistics and finances, a lack of money, is what's driving people out of school. We can see the GPAs of people as they exit. An increasing number of them are exiting with A's and B's. That tells us something, and we need to start to align the support with those realities. Now, that does not mean that we're talking about turning higher education into a social service agency. Okay, we have a job to do, and they have their job to do. But if we want to help these students actually get in the pathways and finish these pathways, then we just need to connect the dots. We need to become much more prepared to say, you've got a scholarship, you've got these loans, and you still don't have enough money to eat. Okay, it's time to figure out if you're eligible for SNAP. We need to know when to deploy emergency aid, and when we do it, we better not put a FAFSA in front of them. We need to move fast, and we need to move as if the urgency were that this was your own child. We need to communicate in every way we can, and I want to suggest the syllabus is one important place to do it. You've got so many things you have to put on the syllabus already, I know. The thing is, they don't get that much out of a lot of that. They get a ton out of this. Communicating care on your syllabus, care for their basic needs, tells them that you are an instructor in 2019 and you get it. This statement, in about a year and a half's time since I first tweeted it, has been adopted by more than 500 colleges and universities. We'd like to see it go further. Of course, we need to iterate and evaluate. Whatever you're trying, please do collect data. It's how we know what works. And please do include student stories, because that tells us more about what works and what doesn't work and what we need to try next. And the last thing, standing here in DC, I've got to say it. If you want the world to change, you need to advocate for your students. They need you so badly. You can pick which piece of this you like the most. Maybe it isn't the free college part. I don't care. If you want them to work fewer hours, then the minimum wage needs to go further. If you want them to be able to bring their children, not bring their children to your classroom, but be able to have children while they're in college, then we need more affordable childcare. The number of policies out there that are in fact affecting our completion rates and affecting our STEM pipeline are substantial, and we're the ones who are going to need to lead that change. I thank you all so much for having me this evening, but most of all, I thank you all for the hard work that you're doing on behalf of real college students. Much appreciated.
I'm good. That was terrific. Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's basically. You're not going away. Sarah, come back.
Sorry.
No, I'm sure that there are people who want to ask you questions. And actually, I'll start while people line up. I know that Iris basically can direct traffic back there, Iris and Allison. But I know that what you say is absolutely right. A couple of years back, I chaired the Academy Committee that produced barriers and opportunities to 2-year and 4-year STEM degree completion. And one of the biggest barriers that we really found was this idea that somehow faculty were carrying in their head that they were serving the people that they used to serve, or serving the people who were in their class when they were in school, but not really aware that these were people who had family responsibilities, that they were working too many hours, that there were just lots of other kinds of things. And I know that the food insecurity issues are real. So how do we begin to message this better so that our colleagues begin to understand that, in fact, that these are not the good old days?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're trying to spur here, and I do think sometimes it's one conversation at a time, right? It's taking another moment with a colleague who's having some difficulty with a student and asking them what they really know about that student, right? It's talking a little differently about what we do in office hours. Students are terrified of office hours. They have no idea what's going to happen in there. I mean, it's really true. And what should happen when they first come in is you should ask them how they really are. They'll be so surprised. The other thing is, it's so illuminating if you take a moment at the beginning of a semester and you do an exercise with your students. So for example, I don't just go around and have them say their names, okay? I get up and I say, everybody stand up. And I say, we're gonna form a line, and the line is gonna be based on how many hours you're working this semester.
Yeah.
And I'm not judging you. You know, you have to first reassure them, right? And so over here, those of you that are not working 0 hours, over here, let's say 40 hours a week, and have them get up and align themselves. It will help them to see who is doing what they're doing. It will help them to then, you can call on them and ask them for their name and ask them where they're working and what their job is like. You can do this on any number of things. Ask them how many minutes it takes them to get to campus. Do different questions that you're curious about. Of course, be careful in not asking about a highly stigmatized issue. You know, please don't ask them how many are homeless.
Yeah.
Well, also, they're not going to use that word. That's not the word that they would use. But, you know, those kinds of exercises, just to kind of check yourself and check your assumptions, we say we care about data. We say we care about evidence, but we often operate without it.
Okay, I think we have some people lined up. Let's start over
do.
here, and then we'll go over there, and then we'll come back here, and then go over there. Okay.
Is this on? Okay. At the community college level, we experience numbers that I would say you may even be underestimating some of these things because of the low report rate. And a lot of community colleges and also universities now have started food pantries for their students. It's something that we started about a year ago, and it's hard to keep it stocked even. But that's almost the easy problem. The hard problem we're now experiencing is we try to think about this housing insecurity, because that's not something that we can just hand out to a student. Yep. It's extremely expensive, and as you noted, particularly community colleges are very underfunded. Great, wonderful data, fix it. How do we fix it? We need real answers, not yesterday, we need it years ago.
Yeah.
So.
What state are you in?
North Carolina. North
Carolina, okay. So first, yes, over 700 colleges and universities now have campus food pantries. That's up from about 200 just 3 years ago. That's the good news, sort of. The bad news is there's no evidence that food pantries reduce food insecurity. It is, however, the thing that we do. And it's a charitable impulse, and it's good because it starts and sometimes galvanizes a discussion. So we do have to actually go beyond that when it comes to food as well. But with regard to housing, yeah, it's a very ugly moment in time because there are a lot of competing interests, especially around building affordable housing. And in California, we just got really dragged down for a year in a discussion about whether or not community colleges should be mandated to allow students to park their cars on campus and sleep in them overnight. And it was hard because actually it was our survey evidence that kicked off part of that discussion, but if you looked hard at our survey evidence, we don't find that very many homeless students are actually sleeping in their cars. The majority of them are couch surfing. And what it really failed to do as a solution is recognize that you actually don't have money at the community colleges to even staff the security that you need for the overnights. So I think that the answers, especially on the housing side, really lie in changes to public policy, first and foremost. And in particular, changes to things like the low-income housing tax credit. So the private sector is going to have to get involved here, and right now they face very few incentives to do so. How many of us have thought about what would happen if we changed the low-income housing tax credit to also include college students? Right now, full-time college students simply do not qualify, including those at the community colleges. Might we then have more affordable housing going up, and might that then support the work that we're doing at the colleges? The likely answer is yes. What if we also went a step further and HUD created a VASH-like program, which they have for veterans, to create housing vouchers for community college students? We're studying right now in another randomized controlled trial a program in Tacoma, Washington, where we're giving out Section 8 housing vouchers with that housing authority to community college students, enabling them to shop for housing at a lower price and then pursue their education. We think that the main reason this will work is that, number one, we think that housing insecurity is one of the biggest drivers of the leaving of college, and secondly, that this could have dual generation benefits because almost all of these people have children in their homes. If they're more likely to become employed, even while in college, they're going to generate more income, and they're going to be less likely to have emergency room visits and other things that are very expensive for taxpayers. So this will create a virtuous cycle. The ROI could be very high. We need people to push for policy change.
Okay, over here.
Unfortunately, this will be our last question.
I'm available on Twitter all the time, so just hit me up.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
I just wanted to thank you for an excellent talk. I really enjoyed it. Also, thank you for giving us the languages, the terms that are the right terms to refer to the real students that we are working with. I was very happy to see some of the things we have been traditionally using in our university to help students in need, you're mentioning now, but we have a lot of room to improve. I wanted to say one observation and see if you would be interested in looking into it, although you got to talk about it at the end of your talk. 65% of our students, undergraduate students, full-time, are qualified for Pell Grants. And we provide them additional funds. We also traditionally have been getting, because we have a strong science department, federal grants. So we are providing as much as we can to our students. We are still not as successful in getting our students with all this support to finish at a high rate in 4 years. What we have collected tells us that they come with a very weak academic background, and it's not how much content they know, it's their study skill, their life skill, their other stuff. And that creates this one extra year for them where they don't even qualify for Pell Grant because it's 4 years. So I was wondering if you would like to include the education in earlier years than college in your research and see if how much of a significant effect it has in the length of the graduation.
Yeah, let me say just a couple of things quickly about this. First, I do want to say the Pell Grant's available for up to 6 years. It's 150% of program time. However, you're making a very important point that students are timing out of their aid eligibility, and this didn't used to happen because it was 9 years, and now it's down to 6. And many of them don't know that. Another thing, though, that you were highlighting that I want to challenge you on just a tiny bit is it often look like you've met a student's full financial need. And you haven't, because the numbers are incorrect. If you care about measurement, you need to know that the EFC, the expected family contribution, is full of measurement error, and so is the cost of attendance. And we have a new project that's going to show, very likely, based on all of our past research, that their actual need might even be close to double what we think it is, which might help us understand why their study skills might not look great because of the amount of time that they're spending cobbling together these other things to pay their bills. So they can have all this financial aid, but they're still left short. And we see this very kind of inefficiency that occurs where they're still distracted from school. Nonetheless, of course, I think that we want to continue to strengthen their ability to get a leg up on their college coursework as early as we can, and to try to help them get through college as quickly as they can, without, and I think this is very important, without pretending like they can do 18 or 15 credits a semester without first giving them the financial support so they can focus on school.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
We actually have time for one more.
one
I
more.
misspoke. Sorry.
And make sure that it's quick.
The very kind moderator told me if I was super brief. I'm a social work faculty member, so I'm grateful for you to talk about what we use in my field, and I've been stunned by how parallel it is to provide a really good education to the methods and services that we provide in social work. It's always attending to the real need first, surrounding the person holistically, and doing it all in individual relationships. And I think that works.
My grandfather's a social worker.
Okay.
There you go. We have a lot to learn from these folks. For those of you that might get to make administrative decisions at colleges, I'd like you to consider whether some of the staff that we hire around student affairs, they're mainly focused on social cohesion activities. I really have to wonder if, if I were college president, I would probably be increasing the number of people on my campus who have training in social work. I think it would go a very long way. Are we done?
Okay.
Thank you.